What's up, guys? I'm Chris Spags here, back to another Four Corners video breaking down tonight's gigantic 11-game NBA slate, courtesy of Osmo.com. Before we get into all the content, make sure to like this video right now and leave a comment telling me your least favorite player on the slate. A guy who you hate for any reason. Could be because he has killed you before in fantasy basketball. Could be because you don't like his face. Just tell me which guy you don't like on tonight's slate in the comments down below. You'll be entered to win in our big anniversary giveaway. We're giving away 1 full year of Osmo.com content. That's an all-access annual pass, a $700 value. We're giving that away actually today on our Live Before Lock show, which I'll be hosting and announcing later today. But if you like this video and leave a comment, you'll be getting your entry in just under the wire right now. We also have a parallel giveaway on Twitter, which I'll tell you about at the end of the video. But right now, like this video, leave a comment telling me your least favorite player on tonight's slate. You'll be entered to win. First game I want to talk about here is one with the Rockets and the Wolves, one that is a 230.5 total, and that represents a 3.6 point boost for Houston, as well as a 2.1 point boost for Minnesota. Chris Paul's been looking better, and it seems like he's rounding into form. He's averaging 43.1 fantasy points and 32 minutes a game in his last 4. So you're going to see him pick up some run, probably around that 30-minute range. And versus a team like the Wolves has been getting defensively worse pretty much by the week. I think Chris Paul could have a nice day here and be a decent value, even though his price is up a little bit. So his ceiling perhaps not as high as it has been recently. James Harden's still looking playable, but he's definitely lost a little bit of opportunity to CP3, particularly with his assist and rebounding upside. He's been definitely still scoring at a pretty decent clip, obviously carrying that 30-point scoring streak that he's so proud of. But he is losing a little bit of opportunity. That said, his price is at a low relative to where it was in the last few weeks. It's actually matching where he was in early January, so that was when this run was really getting going and everybody was noticing. So I think he's at a pretty decent price. I have no issue with him, though I do think he might still not have enough tournament upside just because of where his price is. There's so many guys available, and again, Chris Paul taking quite a bit off the table. Kenneth Faried's a guy who hasn't gotten a lot of talk recently, but he's still been a steady play night in and night out, and I think he does have a little bit more upside if the game breaks his way. Gets a little more rebounding, gets a little more putbacks. I think this spot versus the Wolves, especially with their starting rotation changing around and moving Dario Saric in, could open up a little more opportunity for Faried. And as a forgotten man recently, because he's just been getting a value and not much above it, I think he could be a slightly interesting play, especially in a game stack. Karl-Anthony Towns is coming off of a disappointing game versus the Clippers, but one where he was really hampered by foul trouble more than anything. Some ineffectiveness, but it really was the fouls more than anything that kept him from getting where he needed to. This spot versus Houston, you have to think about it. Who's really going to match up with Karl-Anthony Towns on their side? Faried is a fine player, but he doesn't have the size to keep Towns from shooting over him over and over again. So I think that Towns is in a very good spot and a good bounce back spot where people are going to be off them because of how he burned them in that last matchup. Jeff Teague got a big game last time out, but I think Andrew Wiggins' return, as well as Towns having some less foul trouble this game, presumably, should cut into his upside a bit here. I don't think he's going to shoot the 15 times he did in that last game if Wiggins is back in the lineup, and I also don't think that he's going to have the same assist upside he had in that game with Towns back in soaking up usage. So I think Teague's a fine play, but I wouldn't expect him to hit that mid-40s fantasy point range that he hit last time out. Dario Saric picked up the start for the Wolves in that last game, and he put up 37.5 fantasy points in 33 minutes. That's a pretty impressive first start here, especially considering the fact he didn't have a ton of usage in that game and also had some early foul trouble. I think Saric is a fine play again if he's starting tonight. I don't mind him, and he actually is a pretty decent lower-priced guy in order to help you fit in some of the higher salary studs. The next corner I want to hit on is a game with the Warriors and the Blazers, one that is a 234-point total, which is actually the highest on tonight's slate. DeMarcus Cousins has already been ruled out for this game for rest, so it is a spot where you're going to see Steph Curry and Kevin Durant get back to what their usage was before he came on board. Cousins has taken quite a bit off the table from those guys. Klay Thompson's been less affected, but certainly a little bit affected as well by Cousins. I think this is a nice spot to get back on track with Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, where they're priced for how they've been getting minutes and usage with DeMarcus Cousins in the lineup, so they could have some upside here if this game stays close. Draymond Green is not likely to pick up a ton of usage with DeMarcus Cousins out, but he is going to get some more rebounding opportunity and just have the ball in his hands more, which creates some more assist opportunity for him and just gives him a little more room to operate, do some things. Maybe he gets a few more shots in. It's hard to say with the shooting stuff with Draymond Green, but I think at his price and the opportunity that's going to come from him just not having another big man in there taking rebounds and assist opportunity away, it's going to benefit him quite a bit. Kevon Looney, too, if he moves into the starting lineup, it could be an interesting punt play. He was pretty successful before DeMarcus Cousins joined the team. Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum are going to be the first two places you would look on the Blazers side, and I think that Damian Lillard seems worth the 17% ownership we're projecting him for right now on Osmo.com. But CJ McCollum, I think, is a bit of a forgotten man here. He's had 2 down games in which he shot 6 for 17 and 5 for 20, but he was on a really hot run besides that. I think if he's going to be under 5% ownership, he could be an interesting play to have in your lineup, especially if stacking up some Warriors on the other side, because this is, again, a high-scoring game and one that the Warriors should be closer than they might normally be otherwise because it's a back-to-back. They just played a really tough one in Utah last night, or versus Utah last night. Yusuf Nurkic is another guy to take a look at. He hasn't been that great recently, and he disappointed in that last game versus the Thunder, but he actually has had a pretty good track record of success versus the Warriors this year. He's put up 35.5 fantasy points, 47.5 fantasy points, and 47 in games versus Golden State so far this season. So I think he's a guy who you may want to consider a little bit here. He's not going to contrarian play. His ownership is in line with where Damian Lillard's is, but he is a play that could have some decent upside for his price. And on a slate of this size, I think it's center. He's definitely worth considering given some other higher owned options out there. One guy I'm just going to mention very quickly, Jake Layman, I think is worth a quick shout out. I think he's a guy who could score quite a bit in the second unit, especially if the first unit falters for the Blazers. I don't know that he's a secure play. He's only projected for 1% ownership, so I would think don't put a lot of him in there, even if you're mass multi-entering. Just a little bit of taste of Jake Layman might make sense because he's a guy who can score fast and also out of nowhere, and nobody's ever on him. Third quarter I want to hit on is a game with the Suns and the Clippers, and this game is going to come with a 229 combined total, as well as a 4.1 point boost for Phoenix and a 5.1 point boost for the Clippers. DeAndre Ayton is the current highest projected owned player at 25% ownership, and that definitely worries me a little bit because this is a great spot versus the Clippers. Ayton's a fine player, but there's a lot of usage that goes to other guys on the Suns, and I think Ayton's a fine play, but one where you might be able to find other pivots elsewhere, like the aforementioned Yusuf Nurkic, who could get you ahead of the field if Ayton doesn't have the big day that it seems like people are expecting. Devin Booker and the currently questionable Tyler Johnson also intrigue me a bit here. Both guys projected for under 5% ownership. I think there would be a compelling part of a game stack because this is a pretty high total game and one that could be interesting. The Suns have disappointed in spots like this before, but Booker and Tyler Johnson, again, if he's in the lineup, have both seen pretty solid recently, and I think they're going to get a good opportunity. Tyler Johnson was up to 30 minutes in his last game for the Suns. I think he's in a nice spot as long as he's playing. Obviously, the playing part is probably pretty key. Mikal Bridges and Josh Jackson both been doing a nice job for the Suns recently, though their prices are up to a point where it's safe to question how much ceiling they have. Josh Jackson in particular has been doing really well, 6 straight games over 31 fantasy points. Mikal Bridges, not quite as much upside, but he's probably been a little steadier, all things considered. I have no problem with either guy, especially as a part of a game stack, though it's safe to wonder if they can give you the upside you need. For a slate like this where there's 11 games, a lot of high-scoring ones, I don't know if they're going to be able to get you the ceiling you'd want for a slate of this size. This is potentially a really nice spot for the Clippers big men, and it's one where Ivica Zubac should get the first shot, and I think that could benefit him. Obviously, people are going to be off of him. He had a really bad start last time for the Clippers, didn't end up seeing a ton of minutes, ended up seeing a lot more minutes of Montrezl Harrell. I think Harrell looks good here as well, but Zubac is going to get the first chance here, and it's a nice spot versus the Suns, one in which they're giving up both a 7% dunk rate and a 34% layup rates, which are both slate highs. They're also giving up 46.3 boards per game, which is up also on the higher end of things. So Zubac could have a nice start, could keep Montrezl Harrell on the bench a little bit more than he would be otherwise, but one of these guys I think is going to have a big day. You need much less of Zubac to get above the field, but Montrezl Harrell looks like a strong play, assuming Zubac falters, which seems like a decent assumption. As always, Lou Williams is a decent GPP option. Last game, he actually hit a 50% usage rate, which is one of the higher numbers put up in the year. But before that, he had 2 games in which he was down a bit. It's sort of all fungible with Lou Williams. I like him, obviously, in the spot with the Suns, who are not a good defensive team. He should be able to get going, but it all depends on how the first unit goes. If they're rolling, again, because the Suns are bad, they may be able to start rolling early as well. Then you will see less minutes for Lou, just less need for him overall. But if the guys struggle again, as the first unit has a little bit recently, then Lou Williams may end up seeing more run and could have another big day. So I think some exposure to Lou makes sense, as long as you know the fact that if he's not going, it's probably because some other guys on this Clippers lineup got going first. One of those guys could be Danilo Gallinari, who I've mentioned in this video before. I've been surprised to see he hasn't taken a big usage bump since Tobias Harris got shipped out of town, but he hasn't, and I think this could be a spot where maybe that levels out a little bit. He's only shot 10 times, actually 9 times in one game, which was a blowout, in the last 3, which have all been without Tobias Harris. So he's not getting a lot of shots up, which you would think he would. This could be a time in which it's a really easy spot versus the Phoenix Suns. He could find his shot a little bit more, force the action a little bit more, knowing that he's going to find success, but he hasn't done it yet. So I think it's an interesting contrarian play and a pivot to Lou Williams, but not a guy who you want to load up on. The last corner I want to hit on is a game with a 222-point combined total, which is not as high as some of these other ones, but it does represent a 2.3-point boost for Brooklyn and a 5.7-point boost for Cleveland. Joe Harris is the first guy I'm to talk about, and he's a fine play regardless of how vengeful he's feeling against his former team in Cleveland. He's actually been on a pretty good run recently, 4 of his last 5 above 27 fantasy points. He's had 30-plus minutes in his last 3 games. Both those numbers obviously would bode well here versus a Cleveland team who's giving up the most field goal percentage from the floor on the slate. I like this spot quite a bit for Joe Harris. I think also having Rodion Kurucs should open up a few more minutes for him potentially. It could also end up with Damari Carroll picking up more, but overall that wing's going to have more minutes to go around, and I think Joe Harris, given how much Coach Kenny Atkinson loves him, is likely to be a guy who benefits. D'Angelo Russell is coming off a 60.25 point day versus Toronto, and he's going to get that first crack at the Cleveland rotation. And we just saw the other day a similar situation where Dennis Smith got the first crack at Cleveland, didn't do a great job. Kadeem Allen ends up coming off the bench and doing well. So I do think there is some logic if you are going to play Russell. Throw in some Shabazz Napier, maybe some Karis LeVert as well, because those are the two guys in that second unit who should end up seeing more usage and could get going and perhaps seize some run from Russell down the stretch. But Russell is going to get the first crack. I like everything I've seen from him. Again, it's a really good field goal shooting situation for him where the Cavs are not good defensively. I also give up a decent amount of assists. So Russell's going to have some upside here. It's just a matter of whether he gets going enough or if the other guys off the bench have an easier time and rest some minutes away from him. Jared Allen looks pretty good here, but he's always a risk to lose minutes from Ed Davis. I think given the weak shooting on Cleveland's side and a not terribly intimidating interior since Tristan Thompson went out, one of these guys could have a big day. I think I might slightly favor Ed Davis, but because he's just going to be lower owned and he's much cheaper. And Jared Allen really hasn't done a lot to impress me recently. But Jared Allen does tend to thrive in some random matchups versus guys who you assume should kill him. I think Larry Nance fits that criteria. So Jared Allen might be an interesting play, especially stacking up portions of this game. And speaking of Larry Nance, he's in a very good spot again as he was the other day, but his ownership is going to be down quite a bit because his price is up. So that's a good spot to go back to Larry Nance. Nance has still been exceeding value based on his current price that's up industry-wide. So I have no problem with Nance overall. It's a nice spot versus the Nets. He's been getting minutes. No Kevin Love out there either, so there's going to be a pretty good chance for Larry Nance to have a good day. Did not intend to rhyme that. The Cleveland backcourt's an interesting one to talk about because there have been minutes there for Jordan Clarkson and Colin Sexton, but they didn't really excel that last time out. Sexton's been fine, not showing as much upside he did in the one game versus Indiana where he went off. Jordan Clarkson's also looking okay. Didn't have a great game last time out, but still barely got to value. His shot has to fall. I think he shot only 6 for 17 in that last game. It's not great for where you want Jordan Clarkson to be. But overall, these guys are in a fine spot. Though there is a chance they lose minutes to Matthew Dellavedova, who's just a much better point guard and a better team guy overall than those two who are just looking for their shot and not really sure how to run a team. And Marquise Chris, again, should be one of the stronger punt plays on the slate. A lot of people came off him last time because he didn't pick up that start due to Kevin Love moving into the starting lineup. Kevin Love's out today for rest, so the minutes will be there for Marquise Chris. He's had a couple of solid games. No monster ones yet, but his price is low enough where I think it's a punt play to open up some of the other options. I think he's totally fine here. It's a big slate. I think you want to have some quality punts, and Chris certainly fits that criteria. So there we go. Those are my thoughts on tonight's 11-game NBA slate. I have more thoughts in the link down below in the description. You can see my full column, The Switch and Hedge, which will give you more insights on every angle I'm looking at in tonight's slate. As I mentioned earlier, make sure to like the video and leave a comment down below telling me which player on the slate you hate the most. Again, could be any reason. Could be them burning you for some tournament in the past. Could be them just having a face that you want to throw a dead fish at. I don't know why you do that. It's a mean thing to do, but if that's what you feel, just leave it in the comments. Tell me about it, and you'll be entered to win a 1-year all-access pass to Osmo.com. It's all the ownership projections I discuss in here, as well as all we discuss in all of our content, rankings from Osmo, projections from Josh Engelman, all the stuff that you'd want. So just like the video and leave a comment. You'll be entered to win. We're going to announce the winner on Live Before Lock today, which is going to be at 6 p.m. Eastern, so go check that out. And of course, if you just want to pay for a membership, you can do that too. In fact, that might even be the better option, but the free option is also good. But of course, if you want 50% off, use the promo code Switch and Hedge. That'll give you half off your first month at Osmo.com. We're doing an interesting promotion coming up in the next week where we're going to be giving away all the access to all the sports for everybody who has an NBA membership, just to give you a taste of what else is out there while we're on the All-Star break. So go use the promo code I'm dropping in here, and I'll be back again soon with more game breakdowns. So good luck.